If you like tabletop battle games featuring miniature figurines, then you're probably already familiar with the Games Workshop. They've got something for everyone. If you like fantasy, for example, then you'll probably like their Warhammer series featuring armoured soldiers fighting against battle-hardened orcs. If sci-fi is more your thing, then you'll probably prefer Warhammer 40k, which features armoured soldiers fighting battle-hardened orcs in space.
Games Workshop has been in business for almost 40 years, and with creative ideas like that, it's easy to see why. It goes without saying that such vibrant, original game worlds would translate well to video games, and the company has had various successes over the last decade, with titles such as Warhammer Online, which was shut down, Dark Millennium, which was cancelled, and Space Marine, which was shit. Although all joking aside, Dawn of War is an exceptional real-time strategy game, and easily a better successor to StarCraft than StarCraft 2 was.
But before their more recent and aggressive foray into video games, there were computer-based adaptations of two of their simpler board game titles. Back in the early 90s, so early that it was in fact 1989, Games Workshop partnered with board game giants Milton Bradley to produce two board games based on their Warhammer properties.
The first of these was HeroQuest, a dungeon crawler for ages 8 and up, which sees up to 4 adventurers, a barbarian, a wizard, an elf and a dwarf, delve into dungeons, crypts, keeps and tombs to complete quests. It is in many ways a sort of Dungeons & Dragons light, featuring a loose narrative the players can follow as they progress through the campaigns. The second game was SPACE CRUSADE, set firmly within the world of Warhammer 40k, and is similar in execution, but focuses instead on 3 squads of Space Marines doing whatever it is Space Marines get up to, which is apparently not too different to the sort of thing barbarians, wizards, elves and dwarves do.
Both games were very well received, and several expansion packs were released for both titles. And with their streamlined design and simple rules, they were ripe for a home computer adaptation. And that's where Sheffield-based Gremlin Graphics came in.
Gremlin published a number of popular-ish games in the 90s, with titles like Zool, Little Devil and Actua Soccer, and they even put out a game based on the Ed Wood cinematic disaster piece Plan 9 from Outer Space. Weird, but not as weird as bundling the game with a VHS copy of the film itself. Blimey. The first of the two games was HeroQuest, and as things go, it's a relatively faithful adaptation of the board game, with the added bonus that because the computer is serving as the games master, you don't actually need any friends to be able to enjoy the game.
Which was a huge boon for me as a child, I can tell you. I didn't have friends.
You pick your class, you name your guy, you choose your scenario, and then you push on through the dungeons, completing your tasks, finding gold, and punching orcs, skeletons, demons, and chaos knights in the face and or genitals. Everything from the board game is here, and it's more or less well presented, but the geometric tactics-style visuals and the limited screen space mean you can only ever see part of the board at a time, as opposed to all of it all the time like you can in real life. So you may have no idea what's at the other end of a hallway you should be able to see straight down. The game gets around this by giving you a map, and that does fill out based on the point of view of the player characters, but the constant back and forth between the map and the game proper can get somewhat irritating.
If this were a modern game, they'd solve that problem by having the board be full 3D so you can zoom in and out. Mind you, if this were a modern game, there'd be half the number of campaigns, the elf would be an in-store pre-order bonus, and the game would cost $60.
The game also doesn't do a good job of notifying you when you're low on health, by which you mean it just sort of has your health up there in the corner and doesn't bother saying, hey, just so you know, you might want to chug a health potion or something because, Christ, you look like shit. As your health carries over from one scenario to the next, it's easy to forget to heal up your dude guy and wind up getting fucked by a roaming skeleton at the start of your second game.
But as long as you remember to restore your health between games, you'll be fine. Just stick a post-it note on your monitor or something.
HeroQuest was also released for the PC with both EGA and VGA graphics sets, both of which look significantly different from the Amiga version, which uses a very limited colour palette to great effect. I'd love to show you the EGA version, but I wasn't able to capture footage of the thing, so you'll have to make do with this screenshot. Look at this. Looks like a painting you'd see hanging in the bathroom of an Indian restaurant. Of course, the VGA version has much more colour, that's kind of VGA's thing, and with more colour comes more detail and variety, meaning the VGA version looks a lot more authentic than its Amiga counterpart, where the rooms all look more or less the same with just 3 or 4 sets of floor tiles to use for rooms and corridors. The VGA version's rooms more accurately reflect the design of the board game itself. It's a nice touch, and what's more, because each room has its own unique design, you seldom find yourself having to check your map to recall which room you're in. This game was also ported to a handful of other computer systems, including the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum, and there's an unreleased, unfinished port for the Nintendo Entertainment System, which looks like this. We're looking at it right, that's what we're looking at, those where our eyes are right now. There's a ROM floating around online, if you know where to look.
Right, well, that's enough gallivanting with orcs in dungeons. Let's gallivant with orcs aboard derelict spaceships instead. I've already put the main disc in the drive, so I'm just waiting. Jesus! Fuck! God, I wasn't expecting that. Blimey, that's just...
Space Crusade has you commanding a squad of hardened space marines led by George W. Bush through derelict spaceships and performing a variety of mission objectives, from seek and destroy to, well, that's basically it really. The biggest change is that unlike HeroQuest, this isn't actually a straight adaptation of the board game. The mission objectives are the same as the ones from the Milton Bradley original, but rather than use the layout from the board game, which involves arranging the 4 quarter-sized boards into various configurations, the computer game uses original maps which are much, much larger. Playing a game of Space Crusade on your computer can take a bloody long time, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you.
Personally, I loved it as a kid because, again, no friends. Yeah, I keep mentioning it, and I'm going to keep mentioning it until I get the pity I deserve.
Of course, bigger maps means more enemies, and the AI in this game is merciless. There will be countless casualties as you progress through a mission, and even playing solo, you may want to consider putting multiple factions of Space Marines in play to increase your odds of success. This game also uses a top-down perspective rather than the isometric view of its predecessor, which means you can actually see more of the game board at one time, making tactical decisions a hell of a lot simpler. The game does switch to an isometric view for combat, which is nice, and speaking of combat, Space Crusade actually lets you see the dice being rolled, representing each die as a digit on a terminal panel. That's something HeroQuest doesn't bother with, it just shows you the resulting throw and the outcome of combat. Space Crusade leaves the limitations of a board game behind, which is fine and dandy. If I'd wanted to play the board game, I'd just do that. But by making the map so much bigger and throwing significantly more enemies at you, your chances of success become that much slimmer, and with the vicious, computer-controlled enemies coming at you from all angles, you may find your men falling to their knees.
When you've got orcs, imps and chaos marines shooting their load at you and coming at you from all angles, and then suddenly a soul sucker walks in and does what soul suckers do best, it's very easy to find yourself in a compromising position that you can't wriggle out of. Sexy.
In a lot of ways, Space Crusade resembles UFO Enemy Unknown, which was released 2 years later, though Enemy Unknown's turn-based tactical moments are much smaller and more personal and intimate, while Space Crusade is big and vast and nowhere near as clever, though it definitely thinks it is. A DOS port was also released, and while, like the DOS version of HeroQuest, it's much more colourful, the graphics look like they were drawn by someone else entirely and don't do the game any favours, with the portrait of the alien leader looking much, much more stupid than his Amiga counterpart. I mean, look at this guy. I mean, this guy he's scary, he's legitimately terrifying. This guy, however, looks like a party decoration for Chinese New Year.
Both HeroQuest and Space Crusade received expansion packs, and HeroQuest actually got a fully fledged sequel which had nothing to do with the board game, but was still pretty decent nonetheless. Now, if you want to play these games, then you'll have to download them from places, online places. Is it legal? Probably not, but Gremlin Graphics aren't exactly around to complain about it now, are they? So, you can go do that. Go do that, and I'll just stop talking.